Lena Matthews had always considered herself a good judge of character. She wasn't the type to fall for flashy charm or smooth talkers. She wanted something real, a someone genuine, and that's exactly what she thought she had found in Daniel. They met in the most ordinary way, at a bookstore. Lena had been reaching for the last copy of a mystery novel when Daniel, standing beside her, offered it with a grin. "I think you might like this one," he'd said, his blue eyes twinkling. That simple, easygoing confidence had stuck with her. Daniel was different from anyone she had dated before. He was kind but mysterious, thoughtful but private. He had a steady job, worked in logistics, whatever that meant, and never seemed to be in a hurry. Lena loved that about him. He was patient, attentive, always present. Their relationship moved fast, but never felt rushed. Within a year, they were married, settling into a cozy home in D.C. He cooked breakfast every Sunday, brought her coffee in bed, and made her laugh when she was stressed. Life was good, stable. But then little things started nagging at her. Daniel never talked much about his job. He'd leave early, come home late, and sometimes disappear on work trips without much detail. He never mentioned coworkers, and when she asked about his past, he kept things vague, just enough to answer, but not enough to satisfy. And then there were the moments that didn't make sense, like the time she caught him speaking Russian fluently on a phone call, something he had never mentioned knowing. Or the time he spotted a man in a restaurant and immediately insisted they leave. She told herself she was being paranoid. Everyone had secrets, right? But one night, everything changed. Daniel was supposed to be in Chicago on a business trip. Lena had just settled in for the night when she heard something outside. A noise, barely there, but enough to put her on edge. She peeked out the window, and there, standing in the shadows of their backyard, was her husband, dressed in all black, holding a gun. Lena's heart pounded. Her perfect husband, the man she thought she knew, was a complete stranger. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She ducked behind the curtain, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure he'd hear it from outside. What the hell was Daniel doing, sneaking around their own backyard with a gun? Her first instinct was to grab her phone and call him, pretend she hadn't seen anything. But then she saw him move. He wasn't just standing there. He was watching something, or someone. Lena carefully peeked through the blinds. A second figure emerged from the darkness, a tall man dressed in all black, just like Daniel. They exchanged a few words, too quiet for her to hear, but the tension between them was obvious. And then, out of nowhere, Daniel lunged. He tackled the man to the ground with swift, practiced movements. Before Lena could even process what was happening, Daniel had the guy pinned, twisting his arm behind his back. It wasn't the first time Lena had seen him be strong. He worked out, sure. But this was something else. This was trained. Lena's hands shook as she watched the struggle. Daniel said something low and sharp, then yanked something from the man's jacket, a small flash drive, and just like that, he let him go. The man scrambled to his feet and disappeared into the night, melting into the darkness like he had never been there at all. Lena backed away from the window, her mind spinning. Her husband was living a double life. She had no idea who he really was. A moment later, the back door opened, footsteps, then Daniel's voice, calm as ever. "Lena?" She froze. She hadn't prepared for this moment, hadn't even figured out if she was going to pretend she hadn't seen anything. But her body betrayed her, stepping forward before she could think it through. "I saw you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel's face remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes, a calculation. "Lena," he said carefully, taking a step closer, "I need you to listen to me." She took a step back. "Who are you?" A beat of silence. Then, with a sigh, Daniel set the gun down on the counter and ran a hand through his hair. "You're my wife," he said, "and I love you, but I haven't exactly been honest about my job." Lena let out a shaky breath, trying to keep her voice steady. No kidding, Daniel gave a half smile, like he knew how insane this all was. But it quickly faded. He took a deep breath. "I work for the CIA. Lena's stomach dropped. What? I'm an undercover agent, he continued. My job is to get close to certain people, gather intel, and make sure threats don't become actual problems. Lena shook her head. So, our entire relationship. Was I part of some mission? Daniel's face darkened. Number you were never part of anything. Us? That's real. She wanted to believe him. But how could she? She stared at him, searching for the man she had married, the man she had trusted. But all she could see now was a stranger. And the worst part? She had no idea if she was in danger, or if she was married to it. Lena didn't sleep that night. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel outside in the dark, taking a man down like it was nothing. Every time she tried to steady her breath, she heard his voice, calm, practiced, full of secrets. I work for the CIA. The words kept repeating in her mind. The man she had married, the man she had built a life with, had been lying to her from the beginning. By morning, Daniel was gone. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. I had to leave early. Please don't go anywhere. We'll talk tonight. I love you. Lena stared at the words, her stomach twisting. Did she love him? Yes. Did she trust him? Not anymore. She needed space, air. Ignoring his warning, she grabbed her purse and left the house. The coffee shop was quiet, just a few early risers scattered at tables, scrolling through their phones or reading newspapers. Lena sat near the window, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She had no intention of drinking. Her mind raced. Should she run? Leave Daniel and start over somewhere else? Would he even let her? She pulled out her phone and did something she had never done before. She Googled her husband's name. Nothing. No social media, no work history, nothing. It was like he didn't exist before they met. Her heart pounded, and then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw them. Two men in dark suits sitting at a table across the room. They weren't looking at her, but something about them felt wrong, like they were pretending not to watch her. Lena's hands tightened around her phone. She forced herself to stay calm. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe one of them stood up. A cold wave of fear washed over her. She quickly grabbed her purse and stood too, trying to act normal. She walked toward the door, her pulse racing, but before she could push it open, a voice stopped her. Mrs. Matthews. She froze. Slowly, she turned around. The man who had spoken was tall, clean-cut, and had the kind of controlled presence that screamed authority. Lena forced a tight smile. I think you have the wrong person. No, he said, smiling like a shark. I don't. And before she could react, everything went black. She woke up in a dark room. Her head ached, and her wrists were tied behind her back. Panic surged through her chest as she struggled to focus. Where was she? The room was dimly lit by a single hanging bulb. Bare walls, no windows. A metal chair. She wasn't alone. A man stood a few feet away, arms crossed. You shouldn't have left home, Mrs. Carter, he said smoothly. Lena swallowed hard. Who are you? The man smiled. Let's just say I work in the same field as your husband, but, unlike him, I don't waste my time protecting things that don't matter. Her stomach twisted. Where's Daniel? Oh, he'll be here soon enough. That's the whole point, isn't it? Lena's blood ran cold. This wasn't about her. They had taken her to get to Daniel, and judging by the look in the man's eyes, they weren't planning on letting either of them leave alive. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time blurred together in the suffocating darkness. Then, footsteps. The door swung open. Daniel. He walked in like he owned the place, his expression unreadable. Let her go, he said, his voice sharp. The man laughed. Come on, Matthews. You know how this works. You want her? Trade something valuable. Daniel's jaw clenched. Lena saw it then, the way his hands curled into fists, the barely controlled fury in his eyes. She had seen him angry before, but this was different. This was dangerous. And then everything happened at once. Daniel moved so fast she barely saw it. A gun appeared in his hands. She didn't even know where he had pulled it from. Shots rang out. The man in front of her dropped. More footsteps, more voices shouting. Daniel was already untying her. "Can you walk?" She nodded, her legs shaky. "Stay behind me." He led her through the chaos. Gunfire erupted in the hall. Daniel took down another man, then another. Lena barely processed it. Her only thought was getting out. Then, finally, light. An exit. They stumbled outside into the night. Daniel pulled her into a waiting car, tires screeching as they sped away. Lena gasped for breath, her heart hammering. "What the hell was that?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road, his grip tight on the wheel. Then, finally, he glanced at her. "I told you," he said. "I've been lying to you. But there's one thing I never lied about." Lena swallowed hard. "What?" He reached over, squeezed her hand. "You." And for the first time since this all started, Lena didn't know whether to run from him or towards him. The silence in the car was thick, pressing down on Lena like a weight she couldn't shake. The world outside was a blur of city lights and empty roads, but inside, her mind was racing. She should have been terrified. She had been kidnapped, nearly killed. And now she was sitting next to a man who had just gunned down people without hesitation. Her husband. Her hands trembled in her lap, but she wasn't sure if it was from fear or adrenaline. Maybe both. Daniel finally spoke. "We can't go home." Lena scoffed. No kidding. She didn't mean for it to come out so sharp, but she didn't care. She was angry. At him, at herself, at this whole damn nightmare. Daniel sighed. "Lena, No," she snapped, turning to him. "You don't get to talk right now. I just got kidnapped, Daniel. I woke up tied to a chair because of you." He flinched just a little, but it was enough. Good. She wanted him to feel something. "I had to get you out," he said, gripping the steering wheel. "I had no choice." Lena let out a dry laugh. "Oh, so now I matter?" His jaw tightened. "You've always mattered." She shook her head, looking away. "I don't even know who you are." The words cut deep. She saw it in the way his hands clenched, the way his throat bobbed like he was swallowing something painful. But she didn't care, because it was the truth. The man she had fallen in love with, the man she had married, didn't exist. And the man sitting next to her, she didn't know if she could ever trust him again. They drove for hours. Daniel didn't push her to talk. He just kept driving, his eyes locked on the road like he was expecting an ambush at any second. Finally, he pulled into a run-down motel off the highway. Lena hesitated. "Just for a few hours," he said. "You need rest, and I need to figure out our next move." She wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't staying with him, but she knew it was pointless. Right now, she had nowhere else to go. The motel room was small and smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper while Daniel checked the locks, securing every possible entrance. Then he turned to her. "I need to tell you the truth," he said. She crossed her arms. "Now you want to tell me the truth?" "Yes." He took a step closer. "Because if I don't, you'll never believe me again." Lena didn't say anything, but she didn't stop him either. Daniel took a deep breath. "My real name isn't Daniel Matthews." Her stomach dropped. "I was recruited into the CIA straight out of college. I was trained, sent overseas, given cover identities. I lived in the shadows for years. Then, on my last assignment, something went wrong. I saw something I wasn't supposed to, and suddenly, the people I worked for didn't trust me anymore." Lena swallowed. What did you see?" His eyes darkened. "Corruption, inside the agency, the kind that gets people killed." A chill ran down her spine. "So, what? They tried to kill you?" He gave a small, bitter smile. "Not at first. At first, they just wanted me to disappear. I was retired, given a new identity, a new life. That's when I met you." Lena's breath hitched. "So it was all a lie," she whispered. "Our marriage, us." "No," he said immediately, kneeling in front of her. "That was real. You were real. I never lied about how I felt about you." Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wanted to believe him, but how could she? Before she could respond, a loud bang echoed from outside. Gunshot. Daniel was up in a second, gun already in his hand. Lena's pulse skyrocketed. Someone had found them. Again. Daniel grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the bathroom. "Stay here. Don't move." "Like hell I'm staying here," she hissed. "I'm not some helpless—" "Lena." His voice was sharp, but not unkind. "Please." She hesitated, then nodded, slipping into the bathroom. Daniel stepped toward the door. Another bang, then silence. Lena's breath came fast and shallow. She pressed her back against the cold tile wall, heart hammering. And then the door burst open. Not Daniel. A man in black tactical gear stormed in, gun raised. Lena didn't think. She grabbed the only thing within reach, a heavy metal trash can, and threw it as hard as she could. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The man stumbled, and in that split second, Daniel appeared behind him, gun pressed to his skull. Bang! The man dropped. Daniel turned to her, breathing hard. "Are you okay?" Lena just stared, shaking. Then, suddenly, she laughed, a wild, breathless, "holy shit, I just almost died" kind of laugh. Daniel blinked. Are you okay?" She wiped at her face, still laughing. "I just threw a trash can at an assassin." A slow grin spread across his face. "Yeah, you did." Lena shook her head. "What the hell is my life right now?" Daniel's expression turned serious again. "It's about to get a lot worse if we don't move." That guy wasn't alone. Lena sucked in a deep breath. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know who was after them. She didn't even know if she could ever trust Daniel again. But right now, there was no time to figure it out. So she grabbed his hand. "Let's go." Lena gripped Daniel's hand as they ran into the night, sirens wailing in the distance. She didn't know where this road would lead. She didn't know if she could ever forgive him. But one thing was certain. She wasn't just running for her life. She was running toward the truth. If you want to hear part 2 of the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves.